When my daughter texted, "Dad, please unfriend me on LinkedIn," I thought it was a joke, or a scam, or maybe she'd been hacked. But then the second message came. "It's just having you in my connections makes things awkward with my boss." That was the moment 23 years of silence, regret, and quiet hope cracked like glass under a heel. I wasn't just absent from her childhood. I was now a source of professional shame in her adulthood. The worst part? I understood. I understood why she'd feel that way. And that understanding hurt more than any insult. You see, I wasn't a terrible father. I was a disappearing one. I sent money instead of showing up, mailed gifts instead of holding hands, and told myself I was doing enough. Turns out, my silence grew into her resentment. So when she asked me to vanish from even her virtual world, I did what I had always done. I quietly complied. But this time, I couldn't stop there. I had to know if the door was really closed, or if I had simply never tried to knock the right way. What happened next wasn't just redemption. It was confrontation, exposure, and a revelation neither of us saw coming. Stay with me, because by the end of this story, you might rethink what it means to forgive and what it costs to be invisible to your own child. My name is Thomas Hale, and I am 62 years old. For most of my life, I believed that silence was a form of love, that by not disrupting someone's world, by staying out of the way, I was somehow being respectful, kind even. But now I see it differently. Silence isn't love. It's absence, and absence, no matter how well-intentioned, leaves a mark. I live alone in a modest 2-bedroom house in the outskirts of Boston. After 4 decades as a mechanical engineer in both the private sector and international contracting, I retired 2 years ago. The quiet doesn't bother me anymore. It used to gnaw at me during the evenings, when I'd pour a drink and stare at the front door, half expecting something, or someone, to knock. But these days, the quiet has become a sort of roommate. We coexist. I was once married. Her name was Laura, and she was the kind of woman who made a man feel like he could do better just by standing beside her. We met young, college sweethearts, and had our daughter, Emily, 3 years into the marriage. She had Laura's dark eyes, my crooked smile, and an independence that showed even in her toddler tantrums. For a brief time, I thought I had it all: a family, a career that paid well, and a future that looked sturdy. But life has a way of loosening even the tightest bolts. By the time Emily was 3, our marriage had unraveled. It wasn't one fight. It was fatigue, distance, ambition. I worked abroad frequently, took contracts that paid well, but took me further away. Laura asked me to stay. I said I couldn't afford to. She said we couldn't afford to keep pretending. We divorced quietly. No screaming, no lawyers throwing punches, just 2 signatures and a quiet handover of custody. Laura got full custody. I was granted visitation every other weekend, but those weekends became sporadic. Work called, flights got delayed, and somewhere in the middle of my next promotion, I blinked and Emily turned 9. Then 15. Then 18. I missed birthdays, graduations, school dances, and dentist appointments. I told myself I was providing, that I was doing the best I could. But the truth is, I chose the path of least resistance: distance. When Laura remarried, the dynamic shifted again. Her new husband was stable, emotionally available, present. He attended school meetings, helped Emily with math homework, showed up for soccer games. I wasn't told I was being replaced. I just was. slowly, silently. I never fought it, never wanted to make it messy. Instead, I stayed in the background, sending checks and birthday cards, watching her life from a distance like a neighbor peeking through a curtain. When she got accepted to college, I found out through a shared post. I sent flowers. She never responded. Even in retirement, when I finally had time and the emotional bandwidth to reconnect, I hesitated. What right did I have? What could I say after all these years that wouldn't sound like an excuse? So I started small. I followed her on LinkedIn, sent a request. She accepted, surprisingly. No message, no emoji, just a silent click that felt like a window cracking open. I didn't expect more. But I also didn't expect what came next. I wasn't looking to be her best friend or even her father in the traditional sense. I just wanted her to know I was still here. That even if I had failed at being present, I hadn't stopped caring. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild something. Not from scratch, but from acknowledgement. I was wrong. In the early years after the divorce, my life was consumed by work. Not as an escape, at least not at first, but as a necessity. International engineering projects paid triple what domestic ones did. And for someone trying to support 2 households, it made financial sense. I rationalized the decisions. Every time I boarded a plane to Qatar or Singapore or Johannesburg, I told myself that I was securing Emily's future. That absence today would mean abundance tomorrow. But what I failed to see was that distance wasn't just miles on a map. It was emotional erosion. Emails went unanswered. Birthday cards were acknowledged by Laura with a polite thanks on behalf of Emily. I didn't press. I didn't show up uninvited. I believed, foolishly, that money could serve as a proxy for love. I convinced myself that being a responsible provider was enough, but I never stopped to ask, enough for who? When Laura remarried, things changed more than I anticipated. Her husband, Greg, was a steady man, a high school biology teacher. No big career ambitions, but the kind of man who made pancakes on Saturdays and remembered which stuffed animal Emily couldn't sleep without. She started calling him Dad when she was 7. I didn't find out until 2 years later during a phone call when I said, "Hey, it's Dad." And she replied, "Which one?" That moment should have broken me, but I just laughed. I said, "The other one, the one who can't cook." She chuckled politely, then passed the phone to Laura. I think that's when I began retreating, not just physically, but emotionally. I stopped trying to be a father and settled into the role of silent benefactor. I paid for her violin lessons, covered her braces, bought her first laptop, never asked for recognition, never insisted on being there. It was easier to wire money than to hear, "Why are you here?" Or worse, nothing at all. The peak of my quiet contributions came when she got accepted to college. Laura sent me a formal letter, a printed breakdown of tuition, room and board, textbooks. No warm note, no thank you, just numbers and a deadline. I wired the full amount within a week. I told myself it was the right thing to do, that Emily shouldn't suffer because of adult decisions. But the sting came a month later. During a phone conversation, Laura accidentally left unmuted. I overheard Emily say to a friend, "Yeah, it's all covered. Some university scholarship or something. Lucky break, huh?" There was pride in her voice, the kind that comes from believing you earned something on your own. And I, sitting alone in a hotel room in Germany, felt something strange. I wasn't hurt. Not exactly. I was invisible. That was the word for it. I had become a ghost who paid bills. I never corrected her, never told her the scholarship was me, because I knew if I did, it would feel like guilt leverage, like I was trying to buy her affection. I wasn't. I didn't want to be a hero. I just didn't want to be erased. By then, communication between us had dwindled to near extinction. A birthday like on Facebook, a photo shared publicly on holidays. That was it. I started checking her LinkedIn, reading her career updates like someone studying a stranger's life. And still, I kept sending money, car insurance, a flight ticket, rent deposit, all through Laura, who by then treated our interactions like business transactions, curt, polite, and emotionless. It was only years later that I realized something critical. My financial presence had become its own form of absence. Instead of drawing me closer, it created a wall. One that looked generous on the outside, but felt like abandonment in disguise. I thought I was helping, but I had taught her that I was a figure in the background, someone who contributed from afar, with no expectations and no involvement. A transaction, not a relationship. And in that sense, I had given her no reason to believe I was anything more than a ghost with a bank account. In the years after Emily graduated college, I tried, sporadically, awkwardly, but sincerely, to bridge the distance between us. I wasn't aiming for father-daughter bonding weekends or deep heart-to-hearts. I knew better than to expect that. All I wanted was some kind of contact, some acknowledgement that I still existed in her life. So I started small. Every year on her birthday, I mailed a card. Not an email, not a text. An actual card, written by hand, with a short note and sometimes a small check. I picked the cards carefully. Never anything too sentimental. Never "Love, Dad" in bold cursive. Just something simple, like "Thinking of you. Hope it's a good one." T. Some years, I'd get a text back. "Thanks." No emojis, no warmth. Other years, nothing at all. Then there were the holidays. I'd send an email on Thanksgiving. Something generic like, "Hope the turkey's good," just to remind her I was still out here. No reply. Not even a read receipt. One year, I followed her on Instagram. Her account was public. I liked a few photos. Nothing inappropriate. A picture of her graduation cap. One of her with friends at a coffee shop. But a week later, I checked again and realized I had been blocked. Quietly. No conversation. Just erased. Still, I didn't stop. I sent a message on LinkedIn congratulating her on a new job. "Proud of you," I wrote. "Keep going." No response. But I noticed a day later, she'd updated her privacy settings. I could still see her profile, just not much else. I was beginning to feel like a trespasser in my own daughter's life. The rejection wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was surgical, precise, quiet, and complete. And in a strange way, that hurt more. There were no fights, no confrontations, just silence with intention. I once asked Laura cautiously, "Does she ever ask about me?" Her pause told me everything. "She doesn't really bring you up," she said, "but she's doing well. Let her be." It wasn't cruel, just dismissive, like the idea of me had become a closed chapter in their story. The worst part? I had allowed it to happen. Hell, I had enabled it. There was no big event that shattered our bond. No betrayal. No final straw. Just the slow erosion of relevance, the steady shrinking of my role in her narrative. I wasn't even the villain. I was just unnecessary. And yet, I kept trying. A Christmas card with a bookstore gift card. An invitation to lunch when I was in town. Declined every time. with polite excuses. Busy that weekend. Maybe next time. Work's crazy right now. I remember one message vividly. I'd sent her a video clip of an old jazz band we used to listen to. She was maybe 4 when we danced around the living room to that song. I captioned it. Still one of my favorites. She left it on red. That was when I finally said the words out loud, sitting in my kitchen with the lights off. She doesn't want me in her life. Not in anger, not in self-pity, just in exhausted clarity. Still, even with that realization, I didn't give up entirely. Some part of me believed that if I just stayed close, digitally, emotionally, silently, something might shift. That one day, maybe out of curiosity or nostalgia, she'd turn around and find me still there. But nothing prepared me for what came next. Because one day, out of nowhere, I received a message that didn't just confirm the distance, it sharpened it like a blade. Hi, can you unfriend me on LinkedIn? It's just, having you there is kind of awkward for work stuff. That was the moment everything changed. The message came on a Tuesday morning. I was sitting at the kitchen table, drinking coffee, scrolling through the news on my tablet. No expectation, no anticipation. The notification lit up quietly. A LinkedIn message from Emily, her name appearing on the screen like a rare comet passing through a cloudy sky. My pulse quickened. She hadn't messaged me directly in over a year. I opened it. Hi, can you unfriend me on LinkedIn? No greeting, no context, just the request, plain and surgical. I stared at it for a long time, rereading the sentence like I'd missed something between the lines. Maybe it was a joke. Maybe her account had been hacked. Or maybe it was just a weird way of saying hello. I typed back, hesitant but calm. Sure, but can I ask why? I set the tablet down, hands tightening around my coffee mug. I waited, checking my watch like I was on a countdown for something that would never come. The reply arrived 10 minutes later. It's just, my boss sometimes checks our networks, and having you in my connections makes things kind of awkward. Kind of awkward. That was her phrasing. I stared at the words, trying to understand where exactly the awkwardness lived. Was it my age? My job title from a decade ago? The outdated photo of me in a button-down and windbreaker? Or was it simply that having me there, her father, felt like a crack in the polished image she wanted to present? I didn't reply right away. I didn't know what to say. There was no angry tone in her message, no malice, but it was cold in a way that felt deliberate. It wasn't the request that broke me. It was the fact that it seemed easy for her, effortless even, like deleting me from her professional life was the same as cleaning out an old contact list. I remembered when I'd first sent her that connection request, months ago, maybe a year. She'd accepted without comment. No, nice to hear from you, or how have you been? Just acceptance. But for me, it was a glimmer, a thread. Now she wanted it cut. And this time, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't digital housekeeping. This was a disconnection with intent. I tried to imagine the conversation that prompted it. Maybe her boss saw my name and asked, "Is that your dad?" Maybe she replied too quickly, too defensively. Maybe she didn't want to explain me. Maybe I didn't fit the narrative she wanted to present. I wasn't the present father. I wasn't the one at her college graduation. I wasn't the one in framed pictures on her desk. I was a link she didn't want to explain. A connection that raised questions she didn't want to answer. And now, she was erasing me. Not from her heart. I'd long suspected I didn't live there, but from her image, her brand, her world. I leaned back in my chair, a cold heaviness settling in my chest. This wasn't like the other rejections. This wasn't silence. This wasn't a missed birthday call or a card left unacknowledged. This was active, a request, a boundary, a door, not slammed, but firmly shut with a note left outside. Please don't knock. Still, I didn't want to react out of pride. I took a breath, opened the LinkedIn app, and removed the connection. Just like that. One tap, one swipe, one erasure. There was no confirmation screen. No, are you sure? Prompt. It was gone. Quietly. Painlessly. Technically. But I felt it. Deep. I wish I could say I was angry. That I punched a wall or cursed her name. I didn't. I just sat there. Alone. Watching the steam curl up from my coffee. Listening to the refrigerator hum. It felt eerily familiar. This feeling of being dismissed. Of being an outsider. But this time, it wasn't because I had left. It was because I had stayed too close. There was a cruel irony in that. I had spent her childhood disappearing. Now, in her adulthood, she was returning the favor. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, eyes fixed on the ceiling, replaying her message like a voicemail stuck on loop. Having you in my connections makes things kind of awkward. So, it echoed, reshaping itself with every repetition. The tone, the implication, the casual detachment. It all blurred into one unbearable truth. Was I a burden? That question didn't come from nowhere. It had been simmering for years, tucked beneath every ignored birthday, every unanswered message. But now, it felt undeniable. If even my quiet presence on a networking platform, an icon, a name, a title, was too much, then what was left of me that she could accept? I got up around 2 a.m., poured myself a glass of water, and sat at the kitchen table. The house was silent, save for the occasional pop of the radiator. I picked up my phone and opened my contacts. My thumb hovered over her name. Maybe I should call. Maybe hearing my voice, an actual voice, would soften the sharpness between us. I tapped her name. The phone rang twice, 3 times, then connected. Her voice answered, flat and professional. Hello? Hi, Em. It's me, Dad. A pause, not a gasp, not a sigh, just dead air. Hey, she finally said. Is everything okay? I saw your message earlier, on LinkedIn. I just wanted to ask, did I do something wrong? Another pause, then a sigh, light but unmistakably exasperated. No, it's not that. It's just, look, I'm trying to build a professional identity, you know? I work in tech. My team's young, modern. People notice things. Having a connection with you. Your profile's kind of outdated and she trailed off, but the damage was already done. My profile's outdated, I repeated slowly, like tasting something bitter. I didn't mean it like that, she rushed to say. It's just optics. People judge based on weird stuff. And, well, it's complicated. I see. Dad, look, you can do whatever you want. I just don't want to have to explain things at work, okay? It's already hard enough being taken seriously as a woman in this industry. I didn't know what hurt more, the words themselves or the matter-of-fact way she said them. Like I was a stain on her record. Like I had shown up to her office in a clown suit and asked for a hug. I understand, I said, though I didn't. She was quiet again. I have to go. Early meeting tomorrow. Right, of course. Good night. Good night, Em. The line went dead. I set the phone down and just sat there, the words echoing louder now. You can do whatever you want. Just don't appear where I'm building my career. That line replayed in my mind for days. It was rejection, but not the dramatic kind. It was clinical, like a surgeon removing what didn't fit. No screaming, no tears, just a quiet cut. Over the next week, I tried to write her a letter, not an email. A real letter, like people used to send before everything became emojis and likes. I wanted to explain, not to defend myself, not to guilt her, but to tell her who I was, who I had been, who I had failed to be. The first draft was bitter. "You have no idea what I gave up," I wrote. "You don't even know the full story." I crumpled that one up. The second was apologetic. "I know I wasn't there. I know I don't deserve much. But I miss you, Emily." Too soft. Too needy. The third was quiet. "You don't have to respond. I just wanted you to know that I think of you every day, even if I don't say it, even if I never earned the right to." That one I folded neatly, slid into an envelope, and left on my desk for 3 days. Then I tore it in half. The truth is, I didn't know what I wanted her to do. Forgive me, acknowledge me, undo decades of quiet resentment with a hug and a Hallmark card. None of that seemed real. I wasn't trying to be a victim. But for the first time, I felt the full weight of what I'd let happen. Not just the absence, but the replacement, the erosion, the erasure. And the terrifying part wasn't that she wanted me gone. It was that maybe she'd never wanted me there to begin with. It was the company open house that gave me an excuse. I saw the flyer on LinkedIn. Emily's firm was hosting a public event, a tech showcase for community partners, students, families. "Come see what we're building," the banner read. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't know what she was building, but I knew I wasn't part of it. Still, I figured this was as close as I'd ever get. An open event. No invitation needed. No door slammed shut. I rehearsed how I'd approach her, what I'd say, how casual I could sound without trembling. Just thought I'd drop by. Heard it was open to the public. Keep it light, harmless, maybe even smile. I wore my best button down, pressed slacks, shaved, parked 3 blocks away to calm my nerves. It had been over a year since I'd seen her in person. Longer, since we'd stood in the same room without phones between us. The office was modern, full of glass and light and eager young faces in sneakers and smartwatches. Everyone looked like they were 25 and on their 3rd startup. I felt like a relic from another era. But I kept moving. There she was, near the demo tables, confident, poised, laughing with a group of colleagues. She had that look, like she belonged, like she ran the place, or would someday. I almost turned around, but then she saw me. Her smile flickered, just a beat, enough for me to catch it before she reset. She excused herself from the group and walked over, arms crossed lightly, posture tight. "Dad," she said, not warm, not cold, just factual. "Hey, Emily, hope I'm not crashing. I saw the flyer and thought I'd come see what you're working on." She nodded once. "It's fine. It's public." I glanced around, trying to anchor myself to the room. "You've done well," I said. "Looks like an impressive team." "Thanks," she replied, then hesitated. "I didn't expect you to come." "I know." There was a pause, one of those gaps where every second stretches like wet cloth. I tried to fill it. "I just wanted to show support. That's all." She gave a polite smile. "Okay." Then a man walked over, mid-30s, blazer over jeans, that effortless tech confidence. "Hey, Emily, you gonna introduce me?" She hesitated, then gestured toward me. "This is Tom. He's a family friend." The words were light, almost tossed out like a casual aside, but they landed like a hammer. I didn't react. Not visibly. Just nodded at the man who extended his hand. "Nice to meet you, Tom. I'm Derek, product lead." We shook. My grip was steady. I said nothing. Derek turned to her. "Wait, Tom, is this your dad?" The air shifted. A beat too long passed. Emily laughed. Too fast, too practiced. "We're not that close," she said quickly. "It's complicated." She moved on with Derek, showing him a new feature on a tablet. I stood there, suddenly irrelevant, not dismissed, but absorbed by the noise of other conversations. Not that close. Not that close. It wasn't the words that broke me. It was her tone, deflective, calculated, designed to minimize discomfort. Not hers. Mine. I wandered through the rest of the event, pretending to look at prototypes and product demos, barely registering what I saw. My ears burned. My chest tightened with something sour and dense. When I left, I didn't say goodbye. Back in the car, I sat in silence for 20 minutes before turning the key. She had looked right at me and chosen to reclassify me in real time. Not as her father. Not as someone who'd tried, however poorly, to remain in her life. Just a man who used to be something. And now I was inconvenient. The message was clear, and this time it didn't come through a screen. She had built a world where I didn't belong, and worse, where I made her uncomfortable by existing too close to it. For years, I had blamed myself for being absent. But that night, I realized something sharper. I hadn't just been forgotten. I had become a liability. It was Laura's birthday. She was turning 60, and her husband, Greg, organized a dinner at a restaurant just outside Cambridge. Big place, old stone walls, a rustic New England charm that whispered class and comfort. It was meant to be intimate, but celebratory. Emily had posted a group message to extended family, colleagues, and some of her childhood friends. Technically, I was included. An afterthought, maybe, but included nonetheless. I debated going. For 3 days, I went back and forth. Was it an olive branch or a formality? In the end, I convinced myself that showing up was a gesture, a small human thing. Maybe she'd see I was trying. Maybe that night would open something. I arrived 10 minutes early. The table was long and already half full. Glasses clinked, silverware tapped against plates. I spotted Emily at the far end, seated next to Greg. She was laughing. Freely. Fully. The kind of laugh I hadn't heard since she was 6. When she saw me, her expression shifted. It wasn't shock this time. It was calculation. "Hey, Dad," she said, standing halfway, as though to intercept me before I reached the table. "Didn't expect you so early." "It said 6, I replied. "Thought I'd beat traffic." She nodded, then glanced around the room, scanning the faces already watching. Something tightened in her jaw. I stepped closer. "Where should I sit?" Before she could answer, Greg stood up and waved me toward a seat 2 places down from Emily. I thanked him and sat quietly, the wood of the chair colder than I expected. Dinner started light. Toasts were made. Wine poured. I offered a gift bag. Nothing extravagant, just a framed photo from years ago. Laura, Emily and me in front of a lighthouse in Maine. Before the divorce? Laura smiled, said thank you, and set it aside like a polite obligation. Halfway through the meal, the conversation shifted toward careers. Someone asked Emily about her company's next big launch. She lit up, explaining details with ease. Then someone, I don't even remember who, asked, "Didn't your dad work in engineering too?" There was a pause. Emily looked across the table at me. Her eyes didn't soften. She set her wine down and said, calmly but clearly, "If you're referring to Tom, yes. He used to work in that field." Used to. That landed hard, but I said nothing. Then she added, with a half smile that didn't touch her eyes, "But it's a little different now. We're in very different spaces." Someone chuckled awkwardly. Conversation shifted, but my stomach had already turned. 10 minutes later, as the plates were cleared, I leaned in and tried to speak low, private. "Em," I said, "you don't have to do that. Pretend I'm just a guest." She looked at me, tired, closed off. "If you love me," she said softly, "please stop showing up like this. It just complicates things." I froze. She continued, her voice a whisper. "I'm building something. A name, a life, and when you appear at these things, it puts me in a position. It makes people ask questions, and I don't always have good answers." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came. The words caught in my throat. The room buzzed behind us. Cutlery, glasses, laughter. But around our conversation, it was a vacuum. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cruel. But the message was unmistakable. Don't show up. If you love me, disappear again. But do it more quietly this time. I nodded, just once, then stood up. No one noticed. Or maybe they did and chose not to intervene. No one stopped me. No one asked why I was leaving early. Not even Laura. I walked out without touching my meal. Got in the car. Sat in the parking lot until my eyes adjusted to the darkness. That was the moment. Not when she blocked me online. Not when she called me a family friend. Not even when she left my letters unanswered. This was the moment I realized that I wasn't just an absence in her life. I had become a threat to her narrative. And for her to thrive, I needed to vanish. Again. Only this time with my consent. That night, I didn't sleep. I came home, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at the small desk by the window. The house was silent, like always. But this time, it wasn't peaceful. It was hollow. I opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the box. I hadn't looked inside in over a year. It was filled with things that had no place in Emily's world, but still held weight in mine. Birthday cards I never mailed, photos from vacations she probably didn't remember, and 3 printed emails I had written but never sent. I unfolded one, the most recent. "Dear Emily," it began, "I don't want anything from you. I just want you to know that I'm still here." I had stopped there. I didn't know how to continue, or if continuing mattered. I didn't want to be dramatic. I didn't want to guilt her. I just wanted to exist in her life without being a burden. But maybe that was the mistake all along. Trying to exist quietly. Trying to earn proximity through silence. Through absence packaged as humility. I sifted through the stack of photos. There was one of her at 5 years old, holding a stuffed giraffe, beaming at the camera in her pajamas. I remember that morning. She had a nightmare and crawled into my bed. I made her pancakes. She poured syrup everywhere and declared it a swimming pool for giraffes. I hadn't thought of that in years. Another photo. Her high school graduation. I wasn't in that one. I had watched it online, on a live stream from a hotel room in Tokyo. I had sent a card. I think it arrived late. There were so many moments I had thought I was doing the right thing. Staying out of the way, sending money, not interfering. I thought I was being considerate. I thought I was showing love in the only way I knew how. Quietly, responsibly, respectfully. But now I saw it differently. All that time, I wasn't showing love. I was avoiding rejection. And in doing so, I had created the very thing I feared most, a daughter who didn't see me at all. It was almost laughable in a bitter way. I had tried so hard not to intrude, to give her space to grow, but I had given her so much space that I became invisible. And now, in her adulthood, she wasn't rejecting me for what I had done. She was rejecting me for who I hadn't been. The realization didn't bring rage. It brought clarity. I wasn't going to write another letter. I wasn't going to call or beg or show up uninvited. I had spent 2 decades trying to ask for permission to care. Now, I would stop asking. I wasn't going to fight her, and I wasn't going to vanish. But I was going to do something. Not for her approval. Not for attention. But because it was the right thing to do. I would tell the truth. Not to her, not directly. But to the people around her. To the people who judged. To the people who whispered about the ghost in her story. Because the silence hadn't just damaged us. It had distorted everything. She wasn't ashamed of me because I was a bad father. She was ashamed because she had never been given the whole picture. And maybe, just maybe, hearing that picture, seeing that version, could change something. I didn't need her forgiveness anymore, but I did need to reclaim my voice. I spent the next morning drafting a letter, not to Emily, but to her boss. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't some desperate cry for validation. It was clarity, honesty, the kind that had been missing from the entire equation for far too long. I didn't know what response it would bring, if any, but I wasn't doing it for a response. I was doing it because stories untold tend to rot from the inside out. Her boss's name was Robert Langley. I had Googled him after Emily first mentioned her new job. Former startup founder, now a VP at a mid-sized tech firm. Sharp, polished, active on panels. From what I'd read, he seemed like the kind of man who believed in mentorship and second chances. That was enough for me. I opened a blank email, took a deep breath, and typed, "Dear Mr. Langley, I hope this message finds you well. My name is Thomas Hale. I understand this message may seem unorthodox, possibly even intrusive, but I ask for your patience. You may recognize my name from your professional network. Until recently, I was connected to your colleague Emily Hale, my daughter. She requested that I remove that connection, which I have done. I respect her wishes and will continue to do so. I am not writing to change her mind or ask for your intervention. I'm writing because I believe context matters. And sometimes, the absence of context creates assumptions about people, about their intentions, about their worth. I was not present for most of Emily's childhood. That was not due to a lack of love, but a failure of courage. I convinced myself that financial support was enough, that staying out of the way was the kindest option. I did not fight for custody. I did not write letters when I should have. I did not show up when it mattered. By the time I realized what I'd lost, she had already learned to live without me. I am not telling you this to gain sympathy or to make excuses. I am telling you this because I have been made aware, through her words, through her silences, that my presence, even on a professional platform, may be seen as a liability to her. And while I disagree with that implication, I accept it. What I cannot accept, however, is being erased without understanding. I believe that leadership includes compassion, that people are more than their mistakes, and that, sometimes, knowing the full story can change the tone of a conversation, even if it doesn't change the outcome. You don't need to respond. You don't need to do anything. I just wanted you to know who I am. Respectfully, Thomas Hale. I read it over 3 times before clicking send. Not to correct grammar, not to polish phrasing, but to make sure it still sounded like me. Not the me I had pretended to be, the real one, the flawed one. When it was gone, I closed the laptop and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the kind of spring chill that makes you think of clean slates. I walked around the block twice, hands in my pockets, heart oddly steady. I didn't expect Emily to find out about the letter. I wasn't even sure Langley would read it. Maybe it would go to spam. Maybe he'd skim it and forget it by lunch. That wasn't the point. The point was, for the first time in years, I had said something that mattered, and I hadn't asked anyone for permission. I had told the truth, not for sympathy, not for redemption, but because it was mine to tell. The reply came 2 days later. It was a Saturday morning. I was out in the backyard, pruning the rose bushes, when I heard the ping from inside the house. I didn't rush to check it. Part of me assumed it was a newsletter or a reminder from the pharmacy. But when I eventually wiped the dirt from my hands and glanced at my inbox, I froze. Subject line, regarding Emily. From Robert Langley. I hesitated before opening it. The world paused, just for a moment, as I braced myself. Maybe it was a warning. Maybe he'd say I'd overstepped. Maybe it was silence, repackaged in corporate politeness. I clicked. Dear Mr. Hale, thank you for your message. I read it twice, actually. Once as a manager, and once as a son who never met his father. Let me start by saying, you owe me no explanation. But the fact that you offered one anyway tells me more about your character than any online profile ever could. I wasn't sure whether to respond. It's not often someone writes to me with such vulnerability, and certainly not someone connected to one of our team members, but I believe in giving credit where it's due. And frankly, your letter moved me. You wrote about your absence, about the mistakes you made. But let me tell you what I see. I see a man who owned his past without excuse, who chose truth over silence, and who gave his daughter the freedom to decide her own story, even if it cost him inclusion in it. And about your daughter, I need you to know this. She is exceptional. Emily is sharp, reliable, respected. She leads meetings with confidence, advocates for her colleagues, and takes ownership when things go wrong. She's the kind of person others trust, even when they don't say it out loud. And yes, she's fiercely independent, but I suspect you already know that. Here's the twist you may not have expected. I believe her resilience has roots. We often credit people for who they've become, but we forget the soil they grew from. You weren't present in the traditional ways, but your fingerprints are there, in her discipline, in her ability to stand firm, in her quiet strength. No child becomes that steady without learning something from somewhere. I don't presume to know your full story. I don't know hers either. But I know enough to say this. You're not invisible. Not here. Not to me. Thank you for trusting me with this. Warm regards, Robert Langley. I read the message 3 times, then a 4th. Each line landed like water on dry earth. I wasn't prepared for kindness. I had braced for defensiveness, for polite dismissal. But instead, I found empathy. From a stranger, no less. A stranger who happened to see not only me, but the version of Emily that I had only dreamed existed. Tears came, slow and uninvited. I wasn't ashamed of them. For the first time in a very long time, I felt seen. Not just by a manager in a crisp blazer, but by someone who understood that absence isn't always neglect, and that effort, no matter how late, still carries weight. And something else stirred inside me too. Pride. Not the hollow kind. Not the forced pride that parents fake when they're out of place. But real pride. The kind that grows when you learn your child has become someone remarkable, and when you hear that maybe, just maybe, you weren't entirely irrelevant in that becoming. I didn't forward the message. I didn't screenshot it. I didn't bring it up to Emily. It wasn't leverage. It was a reminder that sometimes truth finds its way back, not through confrontation, not through guilt, but through the quiet testimony of character. And for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the door wasn't locked. It was just waiting for the right kind of knock. Emily found out on Monday. She was in the middle of back-to-back meetings when Robert pulled her aside, casually at first, just, hey, got a minute? As they crossed paths in the hallway. She thought it was about an upcoming launch, or maybe a staffing issue. He shut the door behind them. Something happened last week, he said, tone calm but deliberate. Something personal. It's nothing bad. I just thought you should know. Emily furrowed her brow. Okay. I received an email, he continued, from someone you know, Thomas Hale. Her body stiffened. She sat up straighter, jaw clenching. He reached out to you? Robert raised a hand gently. Yes, but before you panic, listen to me. She opened her mouth to speak, but he didn't let her. He didn't ask for anything, didn't complain, didn't even mention any tension between you. He just told me a little about who he is and who he's been trying to be. Emily's face flushed. I didn't know he'd do that. I didn't ask him to. I know, Robert said, and I'm not bringing it up to criticize you. I just thought you deserved to know how he handled it. Emily looked down at her hands. Her nails were perfect, painted a neutral tone. Her grip on them tightened. Robert leaned back in his chair. He told me about the mistakes he made. He was honest. Raw, actually. No excuses. Just a man talking about his regrets and about wanting to exist without interfering. She blinked rapidly, holding back whatever was pressing against her eyes. I'm not trying to insert myself, Robert said softly. I just thought you should know. It moved me. Silence filled the room, not heavy, just still. Then almost a whisper, Emily asked, Did he say anything about me? Robert smiled gently. He said he's proud of you, that you've become someone strong, that even if he wasn't there the way he should have been, he sees you now, and he admires who you are. She didn't respond. Robert hesitated, then added, He said he wasn't asking for a second chance, just wanted someone to know the truth. That did it. A single tear slipped from the corner of Emily's eye. She wiped it quickly, hoping Robert hadn't noticed. He did, but didn't say a word. More followed. The tears weren't loud or performative. They were quiet, controlled, like a faucet turned just enough to release the pressure without flooding the room. I don't know why I'm crying, she whispered. Robert didn't answer. He knew better. Emily stared at the floor. The words kept echoing in her mind. He's proud of you. He sees you. He admires who you are. It had been so long since she had thought of her father in those terms, if she ever had. Her memories were fractured, scattered pieces across years of disappointment. But now, something shifted. She remembered the giraffe, the stuffed animal he gave her on her 4th birthday, how they'd made pancakes the next morning, how she'd spilled syrup and called it a swimming pool for giraffes. She remembered the jazz song he used to hum when brushing her hair. She remembered a time before the absence grew roots, when he had been someone safe. And then she remembered how she had erased him, bit by bit, not out of hate, but out of necessity. She thought distancing herself would protect her from disappointment, but now she wasn't so sure. Robert stood, careful not to speak too soon. "Take the rest of the day if you need." Emily shook her head. "No, I'm fine." He paused. "You're allowed not to be." She nodded once, a silent thanks. When she returned to her desk, her hands hovered over the keyboard. Her inbox was full. Slack messages pinged. Her calendar was stacked. But all she could think about was a letter. A letter she hadn't received, but had been written for someone else. She wondered how many others he had written, and why he had never sent them to her. It had been 4 weeks. 4 weeks since I sent the email. 4 weeks since Robert replied. 4 weeks of silence from Emily. No call, no text, no unexpected knock at the door. I hadn't expected one. I hadn't expected anything, really. Still, every morning, I checked my phone with a flicker of hope I hated myself for. And then, on a quiet Thursday evening, it came. I was in the grocery store, comparing brands of coffee I no longer drank with regularity when the screen lit up. "Emily, if you're free tomorrow night, maybe come for dinner?" That was it. No greeting. No, "Hi, Dad." No emoji to soften the edges. Just 12 words. I stood in the aisle for a full minute, rereading the message as if it might morph into something else if I blinked. Maybe come for dinner. Not, "I miss you." Not, "I'm sorry." But not rejection either. I didn't respond right away. I finished my shopping. I went home. I stood in my kitchen and poured a glass of water with hands that trembled more than they should have. I didn't want to rush this. I didn't want to ruin the weight of it by treating it like any ordinary invitation. It wasn't ordinary. It was the first time she had reached out, not out of obligation or guilt or duty, but of choice, even if that choice came wrapped in caution. I finally typed back, "Sure, just let me know what time." The reply came 5 minutes later, 6:30. That night, I didn't sleep much, not from anxiety, but from anticipation I hadn't allowed myself in years. The next day, I left the house early, not because I had somewhere to be, but because I couldn't sit still. I walked the neighborhood, stopped by the bookstore, bought a small bouquet of sunflowers, Laura's favorite, not Emily's. It felt symbolic, a nod to the roots, not the bloom. By 6:15, I was parked outside her apartment building. I recognized it from old photos. She'd shared one years ago with a friend, the front steps barely in frame. It looked different in person, smaller, more grounded. At 6:29, I knocked. She opened the door. "Hey," she said. "Hi." She stepped aside. No hug, no handshake, just space cleared for me to enter. The apartment was warm, minimalist, clean lines, muted colors. I took off my shoes without being asked. "I made pasta," she said, walking toward the kitchen. "It's nothing fancy." "Pasta sounds great." She plated the food while I stood awkwardly by the counter, unsure of the rules. Was I allowed to sit? To ask questions? To comment on the framed photo on her bookshelf of her and Greg at her college graduation? We sat at the small dining table. 2 plates. 1 candle. Water in tumblers. She didn't say much. Neither did I. The conversation was light. Weather. Her dog-walking neighbor. A new bakery she liked. I nodded, added where I could, but mostly listened. It wasn't cold. It wasn't warm either. It was careful. After dinner, We moved to the couch. She offered tea. I declined. There was a pause, that quiet moment where the small talk dries up and what's left is the choice to speak or to stay safe. She looked at me, and for the first time in years, really looked. Not through me, not around me, at me. I read what Robert forwarded, she said softly. I nodded. She added, I didn't know you could write like that. I didn't know I could either. Another silence. I'm not ready to talk about everything, she said. I didn't come here expecting that. But I wanted you to know. It meant something. What you said. What you didn't say. I exhaled, slowly. I'm glad. She looked down at her hands, then back at me. I don't know where this goes, she said. Neither do I replied. But I'm here. She didn't smile. But she didn't look away. And in that moment, it was enough. No apologies. No dramatic tears. No unraveling of history. Just a table for two. Just pasta. Just possibility. Dinner became a ritual. Once a month. Same time, same place. Emily's apartment at 6:30. The meals varied. Pasta, grilled chicken, once even Thai takeout. But the tone stayed consistent. Quiet, cautious, steady. We didn't talk about the past. No rehashing, no demands for explanations. It was an unspoken agreement, like walking across a frozen lake without testing the weight of each step. We kept to the surface, and somehow that made it safer to keep moving forward. Emily remained guarded. She asked about my hobbies, not my regrets. She told me about her coworkers, not her childhood. But her tone softened, her posture eased. And sometimes, in the middle of sipping tea or reaching for the salt, she looked at me like I wasn't a stranger. One evening, as she cleared the dishes, she paused. You always liked jazz, right? She asked. I looked up, surprised. Still do. She disappeared into her bedroom and returned with a small Bluetooth speaker. I found this playlist, she said, fumbling slightly with her phone. Thought you might like it. The first notes played, a smooth trumpet riff I recognized immediately. Chet Baker, I said. She smiled, just faintly. You used to hum this one. I nodded, the air shifting around us. That was the first time I felt something crack open. Not wide, not all the way, but enough to let warmth in. Weeks passed, the visits continued. Sometimes we went for walks. Once, she asked me to help fix a squeaky cabinet door. I brought my toolbox like it was a badge of honor. We were building something. Not a fortress, not a monument, but a bridge. And though the water beneath it still ran with old currents, we were walking toward each other, one cautious step at a time. Then, one night, I brought a book. It was a small hardcover journal, black, with a red ribbon bookmark. No title, no author, just a worn texture from years of handling. I handed it to her after dinner. What's this? She asked, examining the cover. Something I've been holding on to, I said. 12 letters. I wrote them to you over the years. Never sent them. She didn't move. I don't expect you to read them, I continued. Not now. Maybe not ever. But they're yours. Her hands tightened around the book. She didn't open it. Why now? She asked. Because I don't want to carry them anymore, I said. And because I think you deserve to know who I was, even when I didn't show up. We sat in silence. Jazz played softly in the background. Same playlist. The trumpet faded into a gentle piano. She didn't thank me. She didn't cry. She just placed the book on her lap. One hand rested on it like it might float away. After a while, she said, I've always wondered if you remembered my birthday when I was 10. I did. Did you forget the school recital? No, I said. I was on a plane. I watched the video later, twice. She didn't respond, but she nodded slowly. That was all. That was enough. When I left that evening, she stood at the door a little longer than usual. As I reached the sidewalk, I glanced back. She was still watching. And though the space between us remained, thick with years and silence and things unsaid, I felt, for the first time, that it wasn't impassable. It was just waiting for the right words to cross it. Forgiveness doesn't always come in words. Sometimes it arrives as a quiet seat left open at the table. A text that says, "I made too much food. Come help me finish it." A walk shared in silence. A playlist played for someone who once danced you to sleep. And apologies? They don't always wear the shape of "I'm sorry." Sometimes they show up as time spent, calls answered, chairs pulled out. Sometimes they sound like showing up when you weren't asked, staying even when it's uncomfortable. Being present not just in memory, but in the moment. That's what I learned. Not from a book, not from therapy, from sitting across from my daughter once a month and choosing over and over not to push, not to explain, not to demand acknowledgement, just to be there. Presence, it turns out, is louder than guilt, quieter than shame, but more powerful than both. There are still things I don't know. I don't know if she'll ever forgive me, truly. I don't know if she's read all the letters. She hasn't said, and I haven't asked. But I do know this. We've stopped pretending the other doesn't exist. We've stopped hiding behind silence in history. We've started showing up, and that counts for more than I ever expected. I've stopped waiting for a perfect moment to say all the right things. Those moments don't come. Life doesn't hand out clean slates. It hands out erasers, one small inch at a time. You don't rewrite the whole story. You revise it gently. Sometimes redemption isn't loud. It's not a speech or a tearful reunion. It's a cup of tea on a Wednesday night. It's fixing a cabinet door. It's hearing someone say, "Text me when you get home," and knowing they mean it. For those watching, maybe you've been on either side of this story. Maybe you're the one who stayed away too long. Maybe you're the one who felt abandoned. Maybe both. Here's what I've learned. Not everyone deserves your forgiveness, but everyone deserves a chance to try again. And not for your sake, necessarily, for theirs. Not so they can be redeemed in your eyes, so they can live with themselves and say, "I tried, even if I failed." Emily didn't owe me reconciliation. I forfeited that right long ago. But she gave me something else, something quieter, but no less sacred, a second chance at presence, and I took it. I don't know what the future holds. We might never get back what we lost. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is this. There's still time. Time to show up. Time to listen. Time to be known. And maybe, if I'm lucky, to be remembered. Not as the man who disappeared, but as the man who finally stayed.